It's that time of year again, and I couldn't think of anything more Christmassy than ripping and tearing demons in the plains of hell. The only thing they fear is you need not apply here. Over the countless years that the Doomslayer's been fighting demons, ripping them apart, toppling hierarchies, and resisting the forces of an entire species of Night Sentinels, arrogance just runs pretty deep. Continually underestimating and only fearing if you got close, the priest would increasingly grow to respect the absolute powerhouse that the Slayer was. With the first Hell Priest only being protected by a few imps and some possessed humans, to the last priest literally throwing everything it had at him, and still he couldn't be stopped. But along with the select few other species of demons, such as the Marauders, the Icon of Sin, possibly even the Barons of Hell, the Tyrants join this line of thinking concerning how they just absolutely are not afraid of the Slayer, which is absolutely horrible for the creature's life expectancy. The Tyrants are massive hulking behemoths that we have seen all throughout the Doom franchise. In fact, the only pro tip that we get from the developers is to keep firing until this thing is put down. Thanks, never thought about that. In reality though, that's really all you can do for these things. Towering over the Slayer and other demons in their ranks, their only focus is to destroy. Prone to a massive amount of infighting with other demons to boot, this destroy mentality is not just relegated to humanity and its savior. That said, what sort of changes have been made to this creature that looks mostly organic, surprisingly, and where may it have come from? Well, let's cover that in today's episode. So with that done and out of the way, you may ask yourself, wait a minute, if the Tyrant is essentially a Cyberdemon, then why are they so different? Well, you are correct, my dude. The Cyberdemon, which if you're interested in a video on that, I will link it later, is quite different from the Tyrants that we see in Doom Eternal. And while artistically speaking, styles did change amongst the two games, I do believe that there's an actual reason as to why these creatures have such different features. First things first, without rehashing the old video out, we need to know a little bit about the actual Cyberdemon, which will kind of make sense as to why they appear physiologically different. The Cyberdemon from Doom 2016 was known as a Balgar demon. This particular version of demon is actually larger than that of the Tyrant and much beefier. In fact, in the cultist base, you can actually find a skull of the Balgar demon, which does not appear anything like the Tyrant demon's skull, which may suggest the difference. Anyhow, at some point during the Doomslayer's time spent in the Hell Plane of existence, an ancient battle resulted in the Cyberdemon being completely decimated. Likely ripped limb from limb, which appears to be the Doomslayer's MO, this creature would lay there and petrify through time. What initially started as a scientific venture to just put the beast back together for purposes as such an exhibit, they soon realized this creature could be reanimated with Argent energy. After doing so, the creature was able to send a surge of Argent energy to its medulla oblongata, which quickly restored its nervous system after that, and then it began to attack the scientists. It was only contained by using someone as bait, and ultimately the Doomslayer would re-rip this creature apart, ending it once more. The key here is that the demon was, at least in my mind, not a tyrant, but something more. And it's also not just in my mind, because this is supported by the lore and the finding of the skull in the cultist base. We can also look at things like overall size, armoring, and horn presentation, as well as the actual jaw and eyes of the Cyberdemon to sort of reinforce the idea that while similar, they are either likely completely a different species or a continuation based on hell energy exposure. Considering that this is some ancient major battle and tyrants are now dropped in front of the Doomslayer like chew toys in Doom Eternal, I am leaning towards the latter over the former. The Cyberdemon, while morphologically different concerning facial features such as jaw and eye placement, obviously stature would be quite similar in terms of composition, such as the actual plantigrade leg structuring. That said, before discussing the actual connection, we must first learn about the Tyrant and its morphological traits. Starting with the feet, we see that much like the Balgar demon's fate, so too has the Tyrant suffered this. The right leg is completely replaced by the cybernetic prosthesis, while the left leg would appear to be in its normal, organic, homegrown form. Initially, it would appear as though the progenitor race of Tyrants had 4 toes, much like other demons, and has still remained the same. The skin on the legs appears quite thick. In fact, the legs almost appear to be like that of a Shar-Pei, in that it is wrinkled and dense, probably on the purpose of acting as an almost armor for naturally occurring dangers. However, the Doomslayer is not a naturally occurring anything. Moving up to the knees, obviously the mechanical leg is mechanical, but interestingly, despite most of the other demons and how this creature would almost appear like a baron, it is in fact plantigrade structuring, and this supports the idea that likely there is some sort of relation between the Cyberdemon and the Tyrants, which again we will get to soon enough. Moving further up the legs, we see that the thighs are quite muscular, but around the pelvic connection point, it's fairly interesting. Within the groin area of the organic leg, we can see metal rivets. These rivets appear to connect some sort of metal girdle that seems to run into the leg itself, making that connection. Interestingly, it seems actually go under the muscle, as shown by the few strips of beef jerky looking muscle over the metal girdle. Why this would be necessary is strange, as we even sort of see that on the mechanical leg, it's kind of connecting to the pelvic girdle. In my mind, this may be the points left over from the abdominal muscle needed to stabilize it. The pelvic girdle is made mostly of metal and has completely replaced the naturally occurring bony pelvis that likely this creature had prior. I reckon it's probably not likely. I mean, it used to have a skeletal mass here, but we will get to that later. Moving up to the abdomen of this creature, likely it still does have some intestines within the abdomen. As we can see, the abdominal wall is still there, but these would probably just serve as more or less leftovers from a previous life, because the real energy now comes from the mass of tubes that run all over its body into this chest, which as we know is Argent energy. So chemical energy, probably not that important. Much like humans, this creature does have a rib cage, but it is exposed and serves really more as a secondary role. And likely this is the only little bit of skeleton left in any major capacity, which seems quite strange considering these creatures are designed to be absolute powerhouses. Why wouldn't you just replace the rib cage? Moving further up the chest, we see that some rivets are attached center sternum, which suggests that the rib cage is actually attached here by unseen anchor points. On the left pectoral exists a single Argent attenuator with a line running further into the body, whereas the right pectoral remains unchanged. Moving to the shoulders, this is really only one of the demons I've ever seen that actually skipped shoulder day. We see heavy armor plating on most demons, and we come across usually larger than average shoulders. But interestingly, this creature does not have giant shoulders, but instead, the left shoulder has a type of Argent attenuator. Moving down to the right arm, we see that largely, it is still in the same organic form as the left leg. So I do break off for 1 second because I have a conspiracy theory about this. So all the demons appear to stand upright on 2 legs, right? Well, why would you need digitigrade structuring if you're standing up on 2 legs? Why not just plantigrade? Even though the essentially backwards facing knee, which is really not a backwards facing knee, it's easier to distribute weight. But I would say that based on the shoulders of other demons, possibly they're all quadrupeds that have recently started standing up because of hell energy. So they still possess a lot of similar characteristics that they would have had in their original form, which may be why the shoulders are always larger. But the Tyrant demon was an actual bipedal animal, and because it was bipedal, the shoulders are smaller. Anyhow, back to it. That said, this creature possesses a sort of blade that can project outwards fused onto its forearm. The blade is much like the crucible blade that the Doomslayer uses and can be quite devastating to the Doomslayer. So for humans and their machines like the mechs, it would really likely have no issue cutting anything in half. The demon possesses 3 fingers and 1 thumb, giving them the same symmetry that we humans enjoy with our 5 toes and 4 fingers and 1 thumb. Which, if you didn't know, 4 fingers and 1 thumb is actually a sign of a recessive gene in humans. The dominant gene of humans codes for 5 fingers and 1 thumb. But what's even more interesting is, as we continue to evolve through mutations that appear to be happening, we may actually end up with 3 fingers and 1 thumb at the end of the day. Regardless of human anatomy, on the other arm exists where the real moneymaker is. This cannon at its disposal has likely completely replaced the arm. There is no hand operating it from the inside, and instead, it's fused directly into the humerus bone of the body. Obviously, modifications had to be made to handle the raw power that this thing puts out, and the muscle of the bicep and triceps have really been replaced by mechanical components. The Argent attenuator on the shoulder likely powers this cannon on the arm. Moving back up towards the head, this creature is just literally butt ugly. Sinewy muscles run from the shoulders into the neck to form the trap muscles, and underneath we can see that the neck, specifically the throat area, has been replaced by a metal apparatus protecting it from neck slashes. But is it really going to protect it from the Doomslayer? No, it's not. Moving further up to the actual head, we see that the face possesses no lips and instead has large teeth that protrude outwards, and they sit jaggedly within the gum of this creature. The nose is flat and large nasal openings sit and almost appear to make the eyes kind of be off-center from one another. They're so off-center, in fact, that you likely wouldn't be wrong in thinking that this creature may have actually been prey on whatever planet it came from, which is a horrifying thought of whatever's on that planet. Side-facing eyes such as this would indicate that there were actually bigger creatures that may have hunted them at some point in their past, although likely this is no longer the case. The top of their head has no hair on it, and huge horns protrude out the sides. So I've been kind of skirting around this the entire time. Internally, this creature is an absolute mess. Causing damage to the Tyrant, you'll find that unlike other demons, even marauders, this creature in particular has very little skeleton left. Most of the bones and the limbs and the spine, and really even the face, have been either coated or completely replaced by metal. I'm kind of more inclined to believe the replacement theory, seeing as if you cause heavy damage to the actual meat of the body, the bones are still staying strong. Likely the skeleton was replaced due to the strain of the cannon of the arms it would actually put on the skeleton and make it non-viable. Because believe it or not, skeletons are connected. In fact, one time I got punched so hard in between the shoulder blades by this dude who was about double my size that I swear I felt my femurs rattle. 0 out of 10, I would not recommend it. So the constant strain of firing this cannon would likely have meant that the regular skeleton was not strong strong enough to support this. In an effort to mitigate this, all connection points were upgraded and entire girdles were replaced, such as the pelvic girdle, but more importantly, the shoulder girdle. Some areas of non-issue, such as the rib cage, remained in their natural form because nothing was likely to happen by not replacing it. The spine was completely replaced by cybernetic components, and with it, the neck itself. This is what we can kind of see before this creature is even damaged. One of the interesting things is that if you damage the head of this creature, metal plates can be seen underneath, as well as if you damage specifically the left portion of the face, a red glowing eye can be seen, which is actually a call out to the Terminator if you didn't know. Sort of like a little Easter egg there for you. So with all of its external as well as internal morphology discussed, where does this thing actually fit evolutionarily? To me, unfortunately, in the last episode concerning the Doom Hunter, we were not able to ascertain exactly what the lower portion of its body looked like, referring to them as Abdomen hunters. It would seem that introduction of more Argent energy could induce changes to become the Tyrant, or evolution in the planes of hell itself caused changes to begin to develop. Looking at the Doom Hunters, they were smaller, but do have some similarities with the Tyrant from what we can tell, and over time, however, species the Tyrants come from may have actually just straight up gone extinct according to the Hell Priests. While yes, there are specific variants, or at least a progenitor went extinct, in my mind the Tyrants were simply a continuation as they adapted, evolved, and changed into what they were. The Abdomen Hunters were likely successful because they were smarter, still possessing some of that intellect from when they were turned by the Hell energy. However, through exposure, mental faculties waned, and they became larger over time, which resulted in the less intelligent, slower, but stronger Tyrants. As time continued and exposure remained high, eventually this resulted in the actual Balgar demons that we see. Possibly the Cyberdemon, considering it was an ancient battle, may have had close relation to the Abdomen Hunters and had the size, and at least the intelligence, because it was so long ago. Then after it fell, the species continued onwards, but this resulted in less capable Tyrants. The lore mentions how these creatures are related, but the disparity between appearance and skull structure indicates that they are not exactly the same. This may also be why the Tyrants quite literally hate the Doomslayer. We see the Cyberdemon, it really recognizes the Doomslayer, and that's why it had its own rage against him. With the Doom Hunters, they were specifically tasked with hunting down Night Sentinels and the Doomslayer himself, and likely a lot of Sentinels fell to them, which built confidence over time, which is why they did not really appear to fear the Doomslayer. With the Tyrants, likely that same confidence is still instilled in them. However, because they are big and dumb, this is almost just arrogance. When you take out a Tyrant, it doesn't look on in fear like other demons do. Instead, it looks on with just pure hatred as you completely annihilate it. It's not afraid to bite the dust because I reckon it thinks it can't. But speaking of taking out Tyrants, how exactly do you accomplish this? Well, like any other demon really, the brain case appears to be the most vital. Yes, you can shoot it until it expires, but the Doomslayer typically will go for either completely mincemeating the brain, which is always effective, or completely removing the head from the body is definitely a good way to put it down. My personal favorite though, and where they're actually hiding that real stuff, uses the Crucible Blade, because you actually trisect the demon as it falls down, ensuring that all those surgeries to replace the skeleton of this creature are really just like a belt made of watches, a waste of time.